Hello everyone, my name is Cri Essencia. We are here because I'm launching my first book, my debut book, and the name of my book is In Search of an Accepting Sea. I started writing the book when I was in the Netherlands, aka Holland. Many people call it Holland, but the official name is the Netherlands. The country is very interesting. The country is very tolerant, but the tolerance of the Netherlands is actually very complex when you start understanding the language, the Dutch language. When I learned Dutch, I completely shifted my perception of the country. I could understand that the portraying or the rhetoric in regards to Africans was very diminishing, let's say so, in the way that normally Africans in the Netherlands are refugees. I would go to the bookshelves and all I could see, or the books I would see by Africans, were always by refugees running away from home, from atrocities in Africa, and eventually being saved by the Netherlands. That's the rhetoric. So this is about Africans who are in the Netherlands. In regards to the Africans who stay in Africa, those are actually not able to survive without the Western aid. So they're not really creative in any sort of way. But then I realized that, well, I am an African, I'm from Mozambique. And I have lived different realities, not only in Mozambique, but I know bits of Africa and I know how life is in Africa. And I know that there are a lot of people who struggle every day, who become entrepreneurs, who become successful by their own means. I have a very close example. My mother, she sent me to Europe with her own means. I was able to study and live in Europe because of a single mother who struggled all her life to provide her children with the best she could. So I would see more of this sort of example in Africa than the ones living from Western aid. I lived also in Portugal besides the Netherlands. And now I live in the UK. So the reality about positive discrimination or affirmative action in those countries, the countries of the north of Europe, let's say, is a bit more active than in Portugal. Portugal, we know that this topic is very much discussed in the European Union. It is a discussion everywhere. It is a discussion in the Netherlands. It is a discussion in the UK. It is a discussion even in Norway. It is a discussion. But it is never a discussion in Portugal because Portugal believes that it is not racist and therefore it does not need quotas, let's say so. This is the same rhetoric that they've always had since the struggle for the independence of the colonies, the ex-colonies. I remember lusotropicalismo. It's a theory coming from a Brazilian writer and sociologist, I think. His name was Gilberto Freire. And according to this philosophy or principle, Portugal was actually, in terms of the settlers in Africa, was actually the one who was the closest to the natives, the one who integrated better, who could mix with the natives, contrary to the French and to the English people, which is not true. This was actually an argument very much used in response to the international pressures coming from the UN in order for Portugal to grant independence to its colonies. So there is racism in Portugal and it's very much alive. And well, you know, affirmative act is a matter of having representation of the society in top management jobs, and even in normal companies working in positions where intellectual challenging is present. We're not talking about having Africans or any other immigrants working as cleaners, because that's what we have in Portugal. Normally, the Africans are cleaners, are builders. All those lower or low-paid jobs are those that Africans are supposed to do. So you will not find a representation of those minorities in significant or prominent companies in Portugal. And you will find the representation of these minorities in England. You will find it even in the Netherlands. You will find minorities in companies and not in Portugal. So this is a big problem. And the fact that Portugal does not really want to talk about it, does not really bring the problem to the surface, is a problem as well. So I would really like to see this being discussed. The book is indeed semi-biographical. The relationship between me and my brother is not the best. It's still not the best. We find each other on Facebook, on social media. We comment each other's profiles and pictures and stuff. But we are not really close. It hasn't changed much. There has been a long period in which we haven't spoken to each other. To his convenience, of course, because he stayed in Mozambique with all the inheritance, let's say. So he sort of disowned me. He sold properties without my signature. I don't know how that was possible. But hey, this is one thing I need to say about Mozambique. It seems like it is possible to sell properties without all the owners involved signing for that selling. So that's what my brother did. And I am still hurt. I can't say I'm not hurt. But I've carried on with my life. I indeed cleaned houses in the Netherlands. And I can say that I really had very much fun doing so. I did it during my master's to pay my studies, and I also did it after my master's because I wanted to prolong my stay. I wanted to stay there. In order to stay longer, it was very difficult to find a job. I couldn't find a job, so I had to remain a cleaner. So I cleaned houses, yes. So, and it was really pleasant because the Dutch people are very kind. They do not shout at you when you're their cleaner or something. They take it as if you were helping them with doing something which is actually their duty. So it's not really your duty to clean their house. So they're very grateful. So they show much love. And actually I remained friends with a few of them, yes. So that was the reality of Paula Chongoene, the protagonist of the book. And that was my reality as well. I'm trying to find a passage that I really liked in the book about the relationship she had, because she had a lot of clients, of course. Yeah. And there are several anecdotes about the relationship she had with her clients. There's one particular client, her name is Femke, and this one was very, very snob. And she, even though being snob and all posh and all that, she actually offered Paula, because Paula was having problems at her own place at the period that it was exams. So that Femke offered Paula to stay at her place for free. And this was a good opportunity because that lady was living by herself. And she could find peace to study, and that was the most important thing. What Paula did was actually offering herself to cook in terms of, as a way to be grateful for the stay, for the accommodation. Paula actually offered to cook for Femke every day. So Femke didn't have to cook. she would cook for her. And let me read a bit, a passage about that episode where Femke asked Paula to serve her and her friends, her 15 friends or something, on her birthday. So, Paula, she said, clapping her hands while giggling as if embarrassed. Femke, I played, shrugging my shoulders, opening the palms of my hands. Mandy and I had an idea. As you already know, in 2 weeks' time, it's my birthday. I was thinking of gathering some 15 friends here at home, and I wanted to see if you could make some snacks from your country and serve us. I could also buy some to strengthen it. What do you think? I frozen at such proposal. How could two intelligent people mind such nonsense? I thought. I would be serving 15 old white people, probably retired, probably with a colonial past experienced firsthand. I, who came from a privileged background, where I grew up having servants myself. I, who received an allowance coming from Africa until just before my mother died, with which I paid for my studies in Europe, housing, trips, and shopping. I, who had decided to venture to the Netherlands alone, where I barely knew people, to be able to do something profitable to pay for my master's degree of my dreams. I, who had developed my being to the point that I could orient myself anywhere in this world. I, who had been much loved by James and probably still was. Now, this passage actually reveals pride. So being proud as an African is not something that you ought to be normally in those countries, especially if you're a refugee. You ought to be docile and not proud. So the special thing about Paula is that she carries her pride through her journeys, and she's very, let's say, stubborn in a way. She really tries to fight for her dignity in terms of personality and yes, as a person, really. You want to know if James existed in reality, like if James existed for Cri Essencia. I have to tell you this. This book is indeed based on my life story, but it goes beyond it. There are characters that did not exist in real life, but I had to create them because the point of the book is to social critique. So all the characters have a function, let's say. So in the end, you will see at the end what James' function is in a way, combining that with criticism. So James did not exist in reality. Unfortunately, I did not have a James in my life. James is actually a mix of the good sides of my my ex-boyfriends. So I compilated James, let's say so. So James is this perfect guy who did not exist in reality, unfortunately. There is actually, yes, Paula is actually obsessed with individualism. I think that stems from her communalist upbringing, let's say so. So she was raised in Africa, and as you could tell, I mean, she had a large family living with her every day. And she calls them, the members of the family, animals, parasites. What else does she call them? Morons. For the fact that those were people who would hang around at her place and they were kind of gold diggers. They would suck her mother's money, and yet would be ungrateful and accusing the mother of witchcraft as being the reason why the mother was so successful. So, well, this is just to give a background in terms of why was she obsessed with individualism. Then let's talk about it a bit as a concept. Well, as Descartes says, I think, therefore I am. So I believe that it should be the first human right to be able to exist in your full self, to own yourself, to have agency in regards to your mind and your body. So this should be a right that you should acquire from birth, let's say. And of course, with right comes obligation, and that would mean that you should be responsible for your own actions. I'm thinking about, for instance, going back to the rights. I'm thinking about people in certain countries, minority groups who are not acknowledged or recognized as citizens. Think about the Kurds in the Middle East, for instance. Many of them are not acknowledged citizenship. I'm thinking also about genital mutilation, for instance. If you have agency in regards to yourself, your body, your mind, I don't think you should, or anybody else should, retrieve you from feeling the total human that you are. I don't think that there's or I don't think that there is any cultural justification for genital mutilation, for instance. How can you deprive someone from feeling all the senses that God even gave to a human being? So in terms of individualism, I think that people should live and have the right to live the way they are, the way they were created by God, let's say, and have the right to live their lives and choose what they want to do without any interference from the government or any culture, let's say. If I'm religious, well, I really like that part as well. I really like the conversation with Manla. The whole thing about the book is about having an alternative to preconceived ideas. It's about being a different African. It's about being a different African in the perspective of Africans themselves and in the perspective of Europeans looking at Africans. So this is a celebration of difference, being different, and fighting for that right to be different. So in this case, Paula is actually, I would call her sort of agnostic in a way. She does not accept that every marriage should be given to a God. I mean, everything you do right. It also goes back to the individualism question. You should be responsible for your actions. You should be also applauded for your actions and merits. So in terms of religiosity, yes, what I wanted to talk about here was that I wanted to raise the question what being Christian really meant, because, you know, there's so many people who call themselves Christians. I think that being Christian is about trying to live a righteous life, trying to serve people in a very humane way, helping people, and not try to harm them in any way, and not try to take advantage of them. I remember a passage here that actually happened to me. I was not lost, but I was begging for a place to stay in a train station. An African lady came to me, and then I went to her, because actually I was going to everyone asking for a place to stay, because I had been rejected a place to stay due to racism. Anyway, so the lady asked me if I was a Christian. And I couldn't answer that question positively. I joked about it. I said, well, aren't we all Christians? Aren't we all children of God? And she asked me if I really practiced religion or went to church. And I said, no. And to that, she turned around and left me there. She couldn't rent me a room, no matter how clean I looked like, no matter how responsible or no matter how many good references I had. She could not rent me a room because I was not a Christian practitioner or something like that. And I think that it's absurd. And another example is Mandela himself. He proposed to Paula to sleep with her because there was a period where she ran out of money, and he proposed to her to sleep with her in order to pay for the rent. This was a guy who really was the word of God's preacher, and he would preach a lot. He would have people at home coming for advice, coming to listen for the word of God. And yet he asks to take advantage of Paula. And so if I am religious, in a broad sense, I would say yes, in the sense that I try to be good to people. That's it. I don't praise any God. I am more of praising people than God. The book is based on my life, but the end objective of the book is to criticize. And I think that the bitter end will leave probably the Dutch people or maybe the Europeans with a sour taste, let's say so. Because actually the end is really, I'm not gonna spoil it, I'm not gonna tell you how it ends, but it's a reality, it happens a lot. Well, you want to know if I have material already to talk about the UK in those terms. You want to know if there will be a sequel, for instance, to the book. Well, I don't really know. What I know is that I always try to write about real facts. This is what I really like to write about. But I have to say that this book has a lot of serious topics, but the main objective is to entertain. I write to entertain. I do so by picking on facts, on real life. So I'm sure that the experience that I'm having in the UK will be somewhere in the book, but will I bash the UK, let's say so, the way I bash Portugal and the Netherlands in a way? I don't know. It depends. I can't tell. I think I'm funny. I hope, and I want to believe that I am funny. I was told so. And I use that in the book, and not only this one, and in my short stories as well. By the way, I have short stories on Facebook. Most of them are in Portuguese, unfortunately, but I do translate some to English. So yes, there are a lot of sarcastic passages and responses to anecdotes and episodes she lives through. Why clean houses instead of running home and inherit a good fortune and have a great career in Mozambique, a country which is booming, they say, right? So everything is flourishing in the country. So why stay in Europe? Well, I have to say that fighting for justice is a virtue, is something you have to do. This is something I've been fighting. I mean, I've been studying. I'm a law professional. So justice really is at my heart. So I really fight for justice. And why did I not fight? Why did I decide to stay in Europe instead of going and fight for my rights, fight my brother? I think that I did that because I thought at the time that I would not have any support. I mean, as I told you before, the rest of the family were not really supporters of my mother. And my mother was actually in an island in terms of values and fighting for life. And she had no support of all those parasites. They would come and suck her money and then leave and curse at her, you know. So I thought that I would have to fight those sharps as well. I would rather stay here and fight for my own future, which is not always the best option. It's not like I'm proud of it, but at the time, that was how I felt. I felt like I had more to give and offer to myself by staying in Europe than going back and fight not only for justice, not only against my brother, but against all my family members, my extended family, and the justice in Mozambique. It's cumbersome, and it takes a long time for someone to reap the results, you know. So did I want to go there and live for 2 years and fight for justice? Sadly, and without any significant support. Maybe I should. I mean, I think this is how justice is actually, but I did not feel that way at the time. Well, my objective with the book, as I said in the beginning, the first objective is to entertain people, right? I want to make people laugh and smile and also cry. I want them to consider the topics I deal with, especially in regards to accusing family members of being witches just because they're successful. Probably this was a long time ago. We will say, well, this was 20 years ago. They didn't know better. But this is a reality in these days still. So I would really like to get people thinking about you are what you set yourself to be, and you can find strength anywhere to become successful. It doesn't have to be necessarily superpower, magic, or something carrying you through. There are also other topics, as I said. Well, the fact that, how do you say it? I mean, I talk about other things that I did not really mention in this interview, which has to do with the fact persecuting albinos in Africa, persecuting homosexuals. There are a lot of social facts that we should really think about and consider and try to make a change for the better, of course. So yeah, that's all what I want to do. I want people to think about the topics I deal with in this book, but in an entertaining way in the end. So this is the reason why you should buy the book. It is very interesting, very funny, and I've had 4 people reading the book, and they all said that it made them smile. I had one even asking for a sequel, really. So yeah, that's it. I mean, enjoy. Thank you.